Vice President Biden clearly has some regrets over how that hearing was handled. As you indicated, he was chair of the Judiciary Committee at the time. And he's got some regrets over that. He's got some regrets over the aftermath. But in addition to talking about Judge Kavanaugh and the confirmation hearings that look to continue next week, we also talked about his presidential aspirations and the reason that he and his wife are here in Washington, D.C. today, along with myself, his very personal fight against cancer.
I think they should do an FBI investigation. We did that for Anita Hill. Took 2 days, number one. And number two, most importantly, Anita Hill was vilified when she came forward by a lot of my colleagues, character assassination. I wish I could have done more to prevent those questions the way they asked them. I hope my colleagues learned from that. She deserves to be treated with dignity. It takes enormous courage for a woman to come forward on the bright lights of millions of people watching and relive something that happened to her, assert that something happened to her. And she should be treated with respect.
You brought up Anita Hill. You were chairman of the Judiciary Committee back in 1991. You were roundly criticized for not doing more during that hearing. Looking back on that, specifically, how would you advise senators to proceed next week? And how do you balance the rights of a woman who's making accusations like this versus the presumption that a person is innocent until proven guilty?
Well, I think the presumption should exist, but what should happen is the woman should be given the benefit of the doubt and not be abused again by the system. My biggest regret was I didn't know how I could shut you off if you were a senator and you were attacking Anita Hill's character. Under the Senate rules, I can't gavel you down and say you can't ask that question, although I tried. And so what happened was she got victimized again during the process. And I believed her when she came forward. I encouraged her to come forward. We were in a position where we got the FBI to do an investigation, and I voted against Clarence Thomas. He only got 7 votes. He got 7 yes and 7 no's. It was a tie vote in the committee. But I hope that they understand what courage it takes for someone to come forward and relive what they believe happened to them and let them state it, but treat her with respect. Ask tough questions, ask substantive questions. Where were you? What said? Who said what? Etc. But don't go after not the character assassination. Well,
it seems like you get it now versus back in '91.
Well, I think I got it in '91. I don't think it's well. People have their own opinion. That's why I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. The second, and during this period, and the second reason, I insisted the next time out, 2 women come on the committee. 2 women. They didn't want to come on the committee. So I campaigned for Carol Moseley Brown on the condition that if she won, she'd come on the committee. It's important. It's important that people understand, and I think people do now, understand how hard it is to come forward. And I always say to men, they say, why it's so hard? How about if you've been abused? You see the movie Deliverance? How about if you were the guy strapped to the tree? Would you come forward? Would you want to relive that? I'm serious. I'm deadly earnest.
Dr. Biden, let's just say hypothetically, come January, this fella sitting next to you comes to you, because we know he's been crisscrossing the country campaigning for a bunch of people. Anyone who's heard him recently knows that he still has this fire in his belly. If he comes to you in January, he says, sweetie, I think I want to be president of the United States again. You say what?
I say, Joe, you would make a great president. But let's think about it.
That sounded like an endorsement. Here's the thing. I know you've said you haven't made up your mind just yet. You sound like a man who wants to run. You sound like a guy who really wants to. Do you want?
Well, I desperately want to change the landscape, and there's more than one way to do it. I'm looking for someone to. There's a lot of really talented people we have out there. Kamala Harris, you got Cory Booker, you got the former mayor of Massachusetts. You got a lot of talented people. But we got to stop this degradation of the system that's going on. That's why I'm campaigning all over the country. I'm campaigning for candidates because we got to build a berm out there. We're going to win back the United States House of Representatives, I promise you. And I predict we'll win back the Senate,
really? Too. You said in 2016 that you regretted not doing it. If you don't run this time, will you regret it?
No, what I said was I regret not being president, but it was the right decision. Look, no man or woman should go out and say, I'm running for president, unless they can look you in the eye and say, you have my whole heart, my whole soul, and all my emotion. And
Our son had just died from cancer, and that's how we started this whole Biden initiative, because, you know, we know what it's like to get that diagnosis. Craig, you know what it's like with your brother just getting that diagnosis. So we're trying to create the urgency of now with our summit, and to bring people together and break down barriers and give them information. So when your brother got that diagnosis, just like our son did, after you feel that punch in your stomach, in your gut, then you say, what now? Where do I go? What do I do? What's this going to be like? What does this mean? We need information. Can we get into trials? Yeah. That's what we're trying to provide with this Cancer Summit.
It is intensely personal.
Intensely.
It is. Bo has left a gigantic hole in our hearts for our whole family. And you know, it's, but there's so much opportunity. If we didn't find one more cure, if docs started to share data, not hoard it, make it available to everybody for research, we'd extend lives beyond anything we're doing right now. If we didn't make one more breakthrough, we're on the cusp of so many breakthroughs. And if we just pick our head up as a country and look at what we have, I mean, there's not another country that's a patch on our genes. We can own the 21st century.
We're trying to give people hope.
But there is reason for hope. There really is reason for hope.
Hypothetically, what would a Biden presidency mean for cancer research in this country?
Well, I can tell you, whether that happens or not, we are going to push. Look, 18 million people diagnosed with cancer this year. By 2020, 26 million will be diagnosed with cancer. 26 million. And the single greatest reason why life expectancy worldwide will not rise, as predicted by the World Health Organization, is because of cancer. And they're answers. They're answers. And I'm convinced, I really am, I'm convinced if you said to the American people, we're going to spend 1/4 of the entire budget and we know we can cure cancer, they'd go. Yeah.
It affects so many people. There's not one person you know who hasn't been affected by cancer.
You're right. It is something that's intensely personal for me as well.
Thank you for being willing to host this thing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal.
Really quickly, before I let both of you get out of here, and before we go back to the studio, I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning about the investigation. If there is no FBI investigation, should the Senate proceed as usual? And should there be a vote if she doesn't testify?
Look, I don't think there should be. I just think, what the devil have we learned here? What have we learned? I mean, so much has changed since I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. So much has changed about how the public understands the pressure on women. And I've learned a lot as well, too. And, you know, it's just, she should not have to go through what Anita Hill went through and some of the questions that she got asked, and the way the right went after her on national television and questioned her integrity and questioned her, not just her honesty, questioned her behavior. I mean, that's just not appropriate. You shouldn't have to be twice put through the same exact thing.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Dr. Biden, thank you.
It took her a lot of courage for her to come forward.
You've said in the past that you would apologize to her. If she were watching right now, what would you say to her?
I'm sorry I couldn't have stopped the kind of attacks that came to you. But I never attacked her. I supported her. I believed her from the beginning. And I voted against Clarence Thomas.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When we come back down next time, I want to do the story on the fact that you guys have been married for more than 40 years, and you put up with him the way that you do. If people only knew.
It's true.
If people only knew, Dr. Biden. We'll come back down and do that story next time. Thank you both. Thank you. For the record, Dr. Joe Biden is my favorite Biden. Kristen, one thing becomes apparent when the Bidens talk about cancer research, when they talk about funding, when they talk about a cure. They are all in on this. That is why me and my wife were down here today for the Biden Cancer Summit. They are spending the day convening thought leaders, researchers, doctors, healthcare providers, and they're coming up and talking about best practices. They firmly believe that in the next 10 or 15 years, we should be able to find a cure for several cancers in this country. So that's why I'm here. That's why they're here. here in Washington, D.C. Just a few blocks from you.
Just a few blocks away. And Craig, you talked about how personal it was for both of you. And I thought that was one of the more revealing parts of the interview. And you asked him, look, if you do become president, what does that mean for cancer research? I thought that was such an important question that you asked. And I wonder, Craig, if you can give us your sense of his answer to you, not only in that moment, but when you asked more broadly, if he's really seriously thinking about running. What was your takeaway, Craig?
I think that if you listen to what he said about 2016, and he corrected me when I said that he had regretted not running, his point was he regretted not being president. You get the sense from that interview that Vice President Biden might be more inclined to run, and Dr. Biden might want to talk about it a little more. That's the sense that I got. And the other part of that interview, one of the defining moments of his political career will always be those hearings in 1991, the Clarence Thomas hearings. That's not lost on him. It is something that he talks about a fair amount, something that he told me that he thinks about a fair amount. And at the very beginning of that interview, I didn't even mention Anita Hill. He brought Anita Hill up within the first 15 or 20 seconds. He's acutely aware that that is going to be a part of his political legacy.
Well, and if he were to run, undoubtedly that entire hearing would get fresh scrutiny. What a tremendous interview, Craig, and what important work they are doing as it relates to cancer research. Thank you so much for being here to share
Always
that
good to
during
see you,
your
my friend.
hour.
Thanks for being here.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.